A trawler works the North Sea in the gray light before dawn, 90 miles from the nearest shore, its net dragging the cold floor of the deep. The net comes up heavy and spills across the steel deck, fish, tangled weed, and black clumps of peat that have no business at the bottom of a sea. And then sliding out among the catch comes something that stops the crew where they stand, a barbed harpoon carved from a deer's antler, its rows of vicious teeth still sharp after 8,000 years. It was made by a man standing on dry land, on ground that now lies 60 feet beneath the black water under the boat, land that vanished so completely the world forgot it was ever there. Because Britain was once joined to mainland Europe, and in the low green country between them, people lived and hunted and raised children and drowned. This is the story of a whole nation that the sea swallowed, slowly across a lifetime, and then, in a single terrible morning, all at once. His name for tonight is Bran, and he is old enough that his memory reaches back further than anyone else's in his band, which turns out to matter more than he knows. He has hunted this country his entire life, a vast, low, green world of braided rivers and reed marshes and open oak woods stretching flat to every horizon. We call it Doggerland now, but to Bran it is simply the world and not the edge of anything, but the rich beating heart of it. And rich is the right word, because this is no frozen wasteland that his people merely cling to. It is one of the finest hunting grounds in all of Europe. Red deer and wild boar move through the woods, waterfowl gather thick on the meres, and the tidal creeks along the coast run with fish and eel and seal. The rivers come down from higher ground and pool into a landscape so generous that families gather here from all around to fish the channels and hunt the crossings. For much of the last ice age, when the sea was locked away in the northern ice and the coast lay far to the south, this was some of the best land in all of Europe to be alive on. It was the crossroads of a continent, the wide bridge over which people and animals moved between what would one day be called Britain and the mainland, a heartland and not a margin. These are the true first Britons and first Europeans, though they would understand neither word, a Mesolithic people of hunters and fishers and gatherers, moving with the seasons, tied to no border because none yet exists. We know they were really here because the trawlers keep proving it, hauling up their barbed points and worked flints in the peat of their vanished forests, along with the bones of the aurochs and mammoth they hunted. Bran knows this whole world by heart, every channel, every ill trap, every muddy ford where the deer come across the water at dusk. But he also knows, in a way that gnaws at him, that the water is no longer where it used to be, and that it has been moving the wrong way his whole life. There are inlets now that were dry ground in his grandfather's stories, new arms of the gray sea reaching inland where oak trees used to stand and men used to walk. The good camp out on the low island, the one the elders still name in their tales, cannot be reached dry-shod anymore because the sea has closed around it. Bran has spent his entire long life watching the map of his world quietly grow smaller, a field here, a meadow there, all of it going under and none of it ever coming back. He does not know why it happens, only that the sea is patient and endless and winning, taking a little more every year, in every direction, without malice and without mercy. To Bran, it is not a slow abstraction on a scientist's chart. It is the drowned oak where his father once showed him a heron's nest, the lost meadow where he first kissed his wife, each memory now lying somewhere out under the cold gray water. This is the part the harpoon in the modern net can never tell you on its own, that Doggerland did not vanish in a single wave, but drowned for many generations first. At the end of the last ice age, the great ice sheets that had locked up half the world's water began to melt and pour into the oceans, and the sea began slowly to climb. Not in a year and not in a lifetime, but relentlessly across thousands of years, a rise you could not see day to day, yet one that never once gave the land back. There were even sudden jumps in the middle of it, when far-off ice dams burst and dumped enormous inland lakes into the sea, and the water leapt in a single season instead of a slow creep. And Bran carries that slow loss inside his own memory, which is the particular cruelty of living long enough to notice. The elders before him told of hunting grounds that are now open water, and he himself can name a valley where the men once ambushed deer at a ford gone now, deep beneath the cold tide. A single human life here is long enough to watch a homeland shrink from a wide connected country to a bare scatter of low islands, and to feel the horizon closing in. Imagine knowing, as a certainty in your bones, that the world your grandchildren inherit will be smaller than the one you were born into, that the loss is one direction only, and there is nothing anyone can do to turn it. There was no map to show them how much had already gone, no word for the thing that was happening to them. There was only the memory of the elders and the plain evidence of the rising water. By Bran's time, this is exactly what has already happened, and the Great Plain is a memory even to the old. The land bridge that once joined Britain firmly to the European mainland has broken apart into a fraying archipelago of reed islands and mud flats, saltwater lying between each one. What was once the fertile core of a whole country is now its drowning edge, water pressing in from every side, the good ground shrinking a little with every storm. Bran's people are among the very last to still live out here on the vanishing land, and some deep part of him understands that they are running out of world. Every high tide reaches a little further into the reeds, every winter storm takes another bite of the bank, and the elders' remembered places slip one by one beneath the surface. It is a homeland dying by inches, so gradually that no single day feels like the end, which is exactly why no one out on the flats is ready for the day that is coming. This particular day begins like any other, quiet and gray and unremarkable, with nothing in the sky or the water to warn of what the earth has already set in motion. Bran is out on the flats at low tide, checking the eel traps, the mud firm and familiar under his bare feet, gulls picking over the shallows around him. And then the sea does something wrong, something he has never once seen in a long life spent reading this water every single day. It goes out. Not the slow, familiar fall of the ordinary tide, but a fast, wrong withdrawal that does not stop where the water always stops. The sea peels back off the flats, off the far banks, off ground that Bran has never in his entire life seen laid bare, and it keeps on going, further and further out. Fish flap helplessly on mud that should be lying under 2 fathoms of water, and the small hide boats tug at their tethers and then settle, stranded, onto the wet ooze. This is the terrible signature of a tsunami that every coastal people would one day learn to fear, the sea drawing a long breath inward, sucking itself back to gather the strength for the blow that follows. For one bright moment it looks like a gift, a whole seabed of stranded fish, free for the taking, more food than a family could carry. Out across the flats, people are already running toward the bounty, laughing and calling to one another, snatching up fish with both hands, not one of them looking at the horizon. There may even be old stories, half-remembered warnings from a grandmother's grandmother, about the day the water runs away from the land, but a warning is a thin thing against the sight of so much free food lying on the mud. But Bran does not run toward it because Bran is old, and in all his years he has never once seen the sea itself look afraid. Far out where the water has fled, there is a low dark line along the horizon that should not be there, and as he watches, frozen, the line is getting taller. 400 miles to the north, off the coast of Norway, something the size of a small country has just let go of the seafloor and begun to fall. Thousands of cubic miles of seabed have broken loose in one of the largest undersea landslides the world has ever known, and the collapse has shoved the entire ocean ahead of it. The people are still gathering fish, still laughing, and Bran is already turning, already climbing, already shouting a word that the rising wind tears straight out of his mouth. It comes as a sound first, a deep low roar that is felt in the chest and the soles of the feet before it is ever truly heard by the ears. The dark line on the horizon has become a moving ridge of solid sea, taller than the tallest tree Bran has ever stood beneath, and it is not slowing down. This is the Storga tsunami, thrown up by that monstrous collapse off Norway, and it is running down on the drowned flats of Doggerland at the speed of a bird in full flight. The landslide that made it moved enough seabed to bury an entire country hundreds of feet deep, and the wave it raised is among the largest that has struck northern Europe in the whole span of human memory. The people out on the seabed gathering fish never stood the slightest chance against it. The wave overtakes them exactly where they stand, and the bare mud they were laughing on becomes the deep bottom of the sea again in the space of a single breath. It roars up the tidal channels, jumps the low banks, and floods across the islands as if they were nothing at all, because to a wave of this size, they truly are nothing. Reed camps, drying racks, fish stakes, boats, the low huts where children slept the night before, all of it is torn loose and swept inland on a churning brown flood full of debris. Whole families are simply gone between one heartbeat and the next, lifted off the ground and carried away, and the sea does not pause or care or even slow. Everything Bran's people built on this soft, generous, doomed land is unmade in less time than it takes to tell it. The tsunami does not strike Doggerland alone, either. The same wave races outward across the whole northern sea, and it will leave its sand meters up the hillsides of Scotland and along the fjords of Norway. In the far Shetland Isles, the water is thought to have run as high as 20 meters up the land, a wall of sea taller than a 6-story building, arriving without any warning at all. Bran himself is on the highest ground his island has to offer, a low rise, a few meters of reed and turf, and it is only barely, grudgingly enough. The water climbs the slope toward him, cold and heavy and full of wreckage, and it stops just short of dragging him down, swirling and pulling hard at his legs. Where the wave has passed, it leaves behind a thick layer of sea sand, laid down meters above where any tide has ever reached, a signature so clear that geologists will still read it 8,000 years from now. And then, worse somehow than the roar, comes the silence as the wave draws back and takes the islands with it out to sea and does not give them back. When the water finally settles and the roar fades to the ordinary wash of waves, Bran is one of the very few left on high ground who can still stand. Around him, where there was a homeland at dawn, camps and traps and the voices of his people, there is nothing now but open, indifferent gray sea. The camps are gone, the traps are gone, and the people who ran out onto the seabed after the fish are gone with them, swallowed whole. For a survivor like Bran, there is no comfort in having read the sea correctly, because being right only meant living to see the rest of them die. He is the last keeper of a world that ended this morning, every place name, every story, every remembered face, now carried only in the head of one exhausted old man. And here we have to be honest, because the true story is harder and sadder than one dramatic wave. The sea had already been rising for more than 1,000 years, and Doggerland was drowning long before the wave ever arrived, worn down to fragile islands and marsh with each passing generation. The Storiga wave did not create this tragedy. It was only the final act of it, the single morning on which a slow, patient drowning became one sudden, unanswerable blow. For a land that was already on its last legs, one great wave was all that it took to finish, and to seal the ending that the rising water had been writing for centuries. Bran and the handful of survivors leave in whatever boats are left to them, west toward Britain or east toward the mainland, and they do not ever come back. There is nothing to come back to, and within a few more lifetimes, the last low remnants of Doggerland slip beneath the surface for good, and the memory of the place drains out of the world entirely. The survivors' descendants become the coastal peoples of Britain and Europe, and in a handful of generations, no one alive remembers that there was ever a country out there at all, or that their own grandparents walked its drowned meadows. A whole country, its rivers and forests, its hunting camps, its buried dead, sealed away under the cold North Sea and forgotten so completely that when we found it again, we assumed the sea had always been there. But it is still down there, right now, and that is the part that should keep you up at night. Between England and Denmark, under the grey water where the fishing boats work their nets today, lies a drowned country the size of a nation, holding still. Marine scientists have now mapped its buried rivers and hills and coastlines from survey ships, tracing the ghost of Bran's world in sound waves bounced off the seabed, naming valleys no living eye has ever seen. Every so often the sea gives a small piece of it back, a barbed harpoon, a human jaw, a lump of ancient forest floor spilled onto a steel deck, 8,000 years too late to matter. A whole country swallowed by a rising sea, and we know exactly where it is down to the fathom because our own boats sail over it every single day. The people who lived and died on Doggerland were not primitive or doomed by their own folly. They were skilled, settled, and at home, and the sea took their country anyway, patiently, over lifetimes they could not outlast. That is the quiet warning the harpoon carries when it clatters onto a modern deck, not a curiosity from a dead world, but a message from people who watched the water climb and could do nothing to stop it. It has happened before to real people on real ground. It can happen again.